Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to the mid-September SUFON meeting. Can I take the opportunity to thank everybody again for their attendance tonight. It's really nice to see so many of you here, so thanks for that. Over the last few years, Emily, myself and Mike have visited quite a number of UFO clubs throughout the country, and I can tell you now that our meetings probably have one of the highest attendance figures of them all, so thanks very much for that, that's great. So let's hope we can keep that up. On the one hand, I really hope that one day we can get to the bottom of the phenomena, but on the other hand, there'll be no club and I'll be out of a job, so I don't know. I think the good attendance figures are not due, at least partly, by the varied and quality speakers that we have managed to source for you, and tonight's no exception. We have the pleasure of the company Mr. Steve Wills, who is a UFO researcher based in Wiltshire. Steve has had an avid interest in the UFO phenomena since the early 1980s, after reading his father's collection of the Unexplained magazines, which set him off in that direction. And he writes articles for magazines and books and is a contributor to the Haunted Skies series, which no doubt many of you are aware of. Tonight, Steve's going to talk to us about what the locals have dubbed as the Warminster Thing, which involves UFO sightings going back to the mid-1960s over Cradle Hill and Clay Hill, is that right? Yeah? Okay. The Warminster has several hills that are ancient landmarks and sport ancient historic structures, including Battlesbury Hill, Star Hill, Cop Heap, Clay Hill and Cradle Hill, which is quite close to an army base, actually. I think that's right, isn't it? Yeah. Now, during the 60s, strange loud noises and bright lights were observed in the area, which attracted so much interest that people were actually camping out on Cradle Hill to observe what was actually going on. Now, while Steve, who's looked at the matter in depth, has been able to explain away a few of the sightings, there's a huge amount that is still totally unexplainable. Anyway, I'm not going to give any more away, so please give a warm SUFON welcome to Mr. Steve Wills. Thank you.
Good evening. Just before I start, thanks to Steve, Mike and Emily for inviting me along. I've been following what SUFON's been doing in terms of their investigations, and they're actually out there investigating and putting this information out to all you guys, and they're doing it. They're upfront on various social media such YouTube and Facebook and the like. So well done to you guys, because I think that's the blueprint for what a lot of groups should be doing. So well done to you. Okay, as okay, cheers. Okay, is that better? Yeah. Okay. The advertised title is The Warminster Thing Revisited. I might deviate slightly from what it says there, in as much as I might be going through some of the investigations in which myself and John Hanson actually did for the Haunted Skies Wiltshire edition, which goes a little bit beyond the 1960s sightings, which perhaps most people will be familiar with anyway. Like Kevin Goodman does an excellent talk on the Warminster Thing of the mid-60s onwards, but we'll do a general overview of the original sightings, and then we'll perhaps look to move on and look at some of the other more interesting cases. Okay, so next slide. Okay, well, this is just a map there of the general area of where Warminster is. It sits on the A36 from Bath to Salisbury. Salisbury and Amesbury, of course, being in the news for all the wrong reasons of late, but yeah, there it sits, Warminster in the middle. Just next. Okay, so if we look at some of the folklore, we go back, prior to the sightings, we always look at these areas, and perhaps sometimes there's something there to suggest that other things were going on in the distant past. So if it's written in the folklore of the town that at one point Clay Hill was said to have been the home of the fairies, to the king of the fairies. and small figures and lights were seen there, and there's additionally legends of treasure and ritual rites which occurred in that area. And the particular piece of art there is by an artist called Paul Boswellian, who's quite local, so big up for him for providing that. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're now going into some of the original accounts that occurred. Now, Warminster seems to be unique in as much that it wasn't UFO sightings which were seen right off the bat. It started with a strange, peculiar noise. Now, around the Christmas period of 1964, a local housewife by the name of Marjorie Bye was walking to a early morning Christmas service at Christ Church, which is pictured there. Now, these strange noises were said to have assailed her, to her, senseless, and she was really weak and jelly-kneed and stuck to the spot. This was kind of the genesis of the thing. But there were a couple of other interesting noises which were reported at the same time. One of which was, if you go to the next slide, then this is Milk Camp. This is just outside of the town in one of the many satellite villages which surround Warminster. Now, this is Nook Camp. Now, on the Christmas period, prior to Marjorie Bye hearing that at Christ Church, there was said to have been the sounds of the roof stack and the roof of all the buildings were said to have been sounded as though they'd been lifted and smashed across the floor. So they were hearing strange noises. These are obviously occupied by soldiers. So a bit of strange, kind of almost a trickster element, because obviously when they went outside, no damage could be discerned. Next slide, please. Okay, this is one of the many hills that surround. This is probably one of the more famous hills. This is Clay Hill. Now, Warminster, probably in the 1960s, prior to the phenomenon kicking off, was most famous for perhaps just being a garrison town. It's got a population around 17,000, which is bolstered up by, I think, an extra 3,000 from the military. Clay Hill, as it happens, actually sits opposite the famous Longleat estate, famous Lions of Longleat and all that. It's literally on the opposite side of the road. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is another shot of Clay Hill, and I've got to give credit to Nick Palmer for this, who took some quite atmospheric photos. Yeah, Clay Hill is made up of two hills, what they call big Clay Hill and Little Clay Hill. Little Clay Hill would be that little kind of top shape there. This is because it was kind of excavated in medieval times, so it's now two hills. Next slide. Okay, this is a photo from my friend and fellow Sky Watcher, David Feast. It's a good photo because it shows from a part of the town a lot of the hills associated with Warminster. So from the left you can see a hill called Scratchbury Hill. The hill with the little copse on the top is known as Middle Hill or Star Hill to some. To the Sky Watchers regarded it as Star Hill, but it's actually called Middle Hill. The other large hill is Battlesbury, and if you see the little copse hill peeking over the corner, that is actually Copheap. Clay Hill, of course, in the distance, and on the top right-hand corner there, this copsed area here is Cradle Hill. So it gives you kind of a little bit of a whistle-stop of the sort of a lot of the places which was written about in the original books by Arthur Shuttleworth. Okay, next slide. Okay, another photo from Mick Palmer, this again of Clay Hill. Clay Hill, incidentally, in a lot of the books by Shuttlewood, isn't referenced that much, but in the latter part of the tail end of the 1970s into the early 80s, this seemed to be the more productive area in terms of sky watching. A lot of people came there to actually sky watch. Cradle Hill, the famous Cradle Hill, which we just saw off that last photograph. This was the famous area for sky watchers during the 60s, and as Steve rightly said, during that period, on a Saturday night, there could be up to 100, 150 people there, which seems, sounds crazy, but apparently this was a regular occurrence. Next slide. Okay, this is the Haunted Skies books. As you might obviously know, John and Dawn have been pursuing this, and these books, they've been doing the hard slog for about 20 years, and they're now up to, I think, volume 11. Yeah, volume 11. A lot of those books are now being revamped, the first 4 volumes. And if anyone knows what these books are like, they're like encyclopedic books. Very thorough, packed full of information. Some stuff you just won't hear anywhere else, They've really done the slog in putting these books out. So I'd have to give a big up to John and Dawn for that. This particular volume was a special one-off. John approached me, I think, in about 2014, and initially pitched the idea that, over the years that he'd been and visited Wiltshire so many times, and acquired so many documentations of sightings, and met so many people that he thought he'd have to put something out. So this is that volume. I've actually got it here. If anyone wants to come and see it later on, but you can see, like, from the thing, it's packed to the rafters with info. Okay, next. Now, does anyone know who this gentleman is? No? Okay, this is Arthur Shuttlewood. Now Arthur Shuttlewood became very much a central figure to the Warminster UFO phenomenon. He had been a local councillor, but subsequently he ended up being a reporter for the local newspaper, which was the Warminster Journal. Now, Arthur had heard about these strange sounds in the first instance, what we were talking about from the timeline, and obviously knew that a good story when he heard one. He knew that this could be a big thing for the town. So subsequently, in 1968, I believe, his first book was The Warminster Mystery, which obviously detailed the stuff that was going on in the town. Over the years, he's been open to criticism in terms of embellishing certain things. Not lying, but he had a certain writing style which kind of sexed things up a bit, But yeah, he was very much a central figure, and he was a sky watcher. He was there almost every weekend for, weeks, months, and years on end. So, next slide, please. Okay, anyone know who this gentleman is? Okay, this is J. Allen Hynek. Okay. He visited the town, and this photo is courtesy of Ian Misliglob. And he's looking. He visited Warminster and a neighbouring village called Upton Scudamore, which had also had sightings, and it's right on the cusp of Warminster. And he's looking at not a crop circle, but a crop depression of types. Next slide. Yeah, there he is there. Maybe if I said, who's that, you might have got it. Yeah, so he's in a crop depression, not obviously not a circle or a elaborate pictogram of type. Crop circles were reported around Warminster in the very early days, in some of them even in the 70s, and indeed the early 80s. Now, as we said, these weren't elaborate pictograms, these were very basic circles, or in this case, just a crop depression. And back then, ufologists were looking at researching it in terms of these being what was called UFO landing nests. They weren't actually calling them crop circles, they were UFO landing nests. Okay, next. Okay, this is, in the Warminster Library, there is a part devoted to a museum and archives. Now, we've just seen Arthur Shuttlewood there, but one of his original Skywatching team members was a journalist who moved from London to Warminster, especially to kind of nub down and get involved with what was going on down there in terms of investigation. And that was a guy called Ken Rogers. Now, Ken Rogers died in the mid-90s, but he bequeathed all his files, his many files and research notes to the town. That ain't all it, by the way. Many of that's just stuff. There's a couple of boxes which relate to the Warminster stuff from him. So next slide, please. Okay, this is again from Ken Rogers' file, that's showing the famous Gordon Faulkner photograph there, which seemed to be the turning point for many. I mean, as we said, there was many strange sounds heard in the first instance, but by the summer of 1965, people had started seeing UFOs. Now, the most common shape then was not so much saucers, they were saying elliptical shapes, cigar shapes, and these what Arthur coined amber gamblers, which were these orange luminosities, you know, possibly plasma type UFOs. But on the just prior to the bank holiday weekend of August, a young man called Gordon Faulkner took a photo of what kind of put Warminster on the map. There was a centre page spread in the Daily Mirror showing this particular object, which he said to have caught. The black and white book on the left-hand side, the cover, that is the Warminster Triangle, which Ken Rogers actually wrote. Next slide, please. Okay, this is detailing a particular landing case which occurred in Warminster. There isn't too much detail, to be honest. I've been through those files quite thoroughly, and there is a report, but not too much detail. But this is said to have been the craft which was seen to have landed in the Lord's Hill area of the town. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is John Hanson on the right, and courtesy of the Alan Hynek pit, this is Ian Misliglod here. Ian was a Bristol-based UFO investigator. Again, he actually was one of the first people to investigate what we would now call crop circles. But like I said, at that time he was looking at them in terms of them being UFO landing nests. Next slide. I think that's that's a repeat of, that's a duplicate. So we go. Okay, this is an area called Cop Heap. It's a right slap bang in the middle of the town almost. It's said to have, Anglo-Saxon chieftain was buried on its summit, and the Copse area there is where one of the very first UFO sightings, which was by a guy who worked for the local council, by the name of Charles Hudd. Now, I think he was doing early morning work, or he was just clocking on or clocking off. And what he said was he saw a red-hot poker, what he described it, red-hot poker, which was said to have been kind of just hovering and hanging over the tops of the trees there. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is the Warminster Central Car Park, and that is actually Cop-Heap. You can see just over the brow of the roofs there. On the right, on the particular wall there is graffiti which was done as part of the 2015 50th anniversary. Local artist done that particular mural. Okay, next slide. Okay, well this is Sky Watchers. This was on the, I can't remember. This was earlier this year. Now a lot of these Sky Watchers are some of the not the original guys, but the second generation. They were there in the 1970s, and these days it's more about a social event as opposed to any serious sky watching. People do have their eye trained to the sky, of course, but you know, it's more of a social event. If you can actually, this is on the top of Cradle Hill. Now, Cradle Hill is the most accessible hill. You can drive directly to the top. You know, I think that's why it probably was one of the more popular locations back in the 1960s. The guy there on the left with the camera, his name's David Simpson. Now, David Simpson orchestrated a number of hoaxes back in the 1960s, and he'd done them around Warminster. Now, what he called controlled hoaxing. So he was, what he was testing was the basis of sky watchers and their ability to exaggerate. So he let off balloons full of like small helium balloons with camera flash bulbs attached. They would go off from a location at the back of Battlesbury Hill, come across, and obviously a lot of the sky watchers picked this up, but what he was trying to do was to establish whether or not the embellishment of the things who would see craft as opposed to describe what they were seeing. So, I mean, I don't know if it was a relevant experiment or not, but that's David Simpson there. Next slide. And that's Alan Hynek again. Okay, again, the famous Cradle Hill has a barn there. Now this was dabbed on the barn. I can't remember. It's not discernible now. It's almost faded away. This was probably taken 10 years or more. We don't know who'd done it. But the barn in particular is interesting. In and around that area, and during the height of the kind of UFO phenomenon in the 60s, that barn was an area which people kind of huddled round and they were here what they were called the invisible walker. Now the invisible walker was just footsteps. They could hear strange footsteps, gravel around there, odd footsteps was heard around there. And myself and a number of other sky watchers have had a few odd experiences there. On one particular occasion, we were down by the gates, which were it's about 100 yards or so down the road. We'd walk up about 1 in the morning from an assembled group, and we had stones being wrapped at the barn. Strange, and they were doing it. They were doing it on request. So I mean, I don't know what that was all about, but that happened. The other thing, there was a guy during the 1980 who was in and around that particular area called Chris Truebridge, who actually saw what he believed across the fields from the barn, which he saw a craft or some sort said to have touched down in a field. Now, as he left this particular location and approached the field, he saw what he described as a 7-foot entity. Now, he approached it, and then he had kind of fear instilled into him. He believes that was the case, and the entity was said to have raised his right hand like this and vanished. So that's one of the accounts from around that particular area. Next slide. Okay, does anyone know what this is? Okay, this is the Gordon Faulkner, and this is the young factory worker who said to have snapped the picture. He said it was a 1 in a million shot. He happened to be taking his camera around to his sister's house. He wanted to borrow it, and he looked over the top of the housetop, and that particular UFO was floating around, and he managed to snap it. Now, like I said, this was the actual. I can't the photos back there, but we'll see it again in a minute. Just next slide, please. This is the photograph. Okay, this is the famous one, and this actually went around the world. This particular picture, this is courtesy of John Hanson, shows the roof TV area on the roof. Normally when we see this particular photo, it seems to be so blown up that you can't actually identify any kind of any real details. But the photo is controversial. In around the tail end of the 1990s, an expat now living in Australia contacted Bufora and John Spencer, and he actually said that he was complicit along with Gordon in hoaxing this particular picture. Now, during his interview with John Spencer, he actually sort of says that, yeah, what we did, we drove up to Cradle Hill and we made I think he said he made it out of a cotton reel and a bottle top, but I don't know. I mean, he certainly didn't throw it up at Cradle Hill to take that shot, because there's no TV areas, and this is actually the rooftops of South Street, so I don't know. On the other side of the coin, Gordon Faulkner suggests that he took this photo at 8 o'clock on the, I can't remember, in the tail end of August, which to me seems that he wouldn't have got a shot like that at that time. Obviously it'd been too dark, and back then those kind of cameras didn't have the kind of low lighting sort of thing to bring it up. So, as I say, that photo is controversial, but regardless of whether it was a hoax or not, what it did, it actually brought it to the attention of the media and the public at large. So, you know, regardless of whether it was a hoax or not, you know, the underlying thing was people had been seeing UFOs, hearing the strange noises for over six months. Next slide. Okay, well, there it is. This is the guy who actually contacted the Roger Hooton was the guy's name, and living in Adelaide, South Australia. Yeah, it was controversy was a Warminster thing. So yeah, what he did, he contacted them and said it was all a hoax. Gordon Faulkner responded by saying, no, it wasn't. He said, yes, it was. And he said, no, it wasn't. So we're none the wiser, really. I've spoken to Gordon's daughter, and I spoke at some length, and she actually said to me that, well, you know, if it was a hoax, Dad never let on over the years. He always maintained it was a true, real photograph. 5 minutes. Okay. Right. Okay. This is a case that I particularly looked into, and I contacted this lady who is called Belinda Saunders. Now I just have to pull a case there. Okay, this is Belinda, as I say, and her case happened around about 1986, 87, she's not 100% sure, 86, 87. But again, she lived very close proximity to Clay Hill. She was with her boyfriend at the time in a car, and what they observed is that as she drove out of the driveway, she said that a strange ball of light came from an area where they had the stables, which swooped down towards the car, lifted upwards and passed directly away, disappearing. Very odd, very strange. She actually answered an appeal. We put, well, I guess you guys do, put appeals into local newspapers and the like. Belinda came up and gave that story, and it was very interesting. So that's that one. Next slide if you want. Okay, again, this is another duplicate. Okay, this is a guy called Steve Maybury. Now, Steve Maybury, he's an author in his own right. However, he had a UFO sighting in around 1996. Again, we talked about an area outside of Warminster, another locale for this sort of thing, Lord's Hill. I haven't got a photo of Lord's Hill, unfortunately. But this is Steve Maybury, and again, he was in a car park with a group of friends. I think he had a girlfriend, his friend, and his friend's girlfriend. And they happened to be just milling around in and out of the car. And what he discerned was a kind of explosion in the sky, and then almost like some sort of projectile emerging from it. Now, he described this as almost being bullet-like, and I think it was, he described it as almost looking similar to glass. They kind of followed the trajectory of it, and it seemed to go down onto the ground. They tried to follow it and run across the fields and that, but where they discerned this thing might have come down, there was nothing. Okay, that's Arthur Sherwood again. Okay, this is a guy called David Munday. Again, David Munday is one of the people who actually contacted myself and John. David lives in Portsmouth and is a big Pompey football fan. Now, his particular sighting occurred in 1980, and he was on one of these football special trains, which back in the 1980s, when there was kind of troubles on the terraces, they would put football special trains on and ferry them straight to the destinations. And he was going to a game at I think Bristol Rovers or Bristol City. Portsmouth was playing Bristol Rovers or Bristol City. So they left the station at a certain time. I think it was 4:35 or something. It was an evening game, and they soon passed Southampton and then directly at Salisbury. Now, not long after they'd set off from Salisbury, it was 20 minutes or so, he observed what he described as a huge sun-type object, which was floating from an area which he now knows was Stockton, which is very close to Codford, which is close to Warminster. Now, he said that the majority of people on that train would have seen it, and he was pointing it. Him and his brother were pointing to a lot of the Portsmouth supporters who actually travel on the train, and he says that lots of people would have seen that. I think he subsequently tried to contact the local newspaper up in Portsmouth and said, "Well, do you remember that game?" But he hasn't really heard anything back as yet. Okay. This was just a sighting that occurred again close to Clay Hill by the Coob family. Now, this was in the tail end of the 1998 look. So, yeah, she saw a UFO. Worried mum wrote a note to her teacher because she didn't want the pupils to tease the children. Apparently the Disney Channel got wind of it and they'd done a little snippet on one of the TV shows. Yeah, next slide. Okay, this is from the back pages of the journal. This is in the light of what we were talking about earlier when the kind of toing and froing between Gordon Faulkner and Roger Hooton. But as the guy who wrote in, which I think is Chris Trubridge, has said there that the Thing hoax was not the only sighting. Of course, he's absolutely right. There was dozens upon dozens of sightings over the years, hundreds in fact. Most of them would have been lights in the sky type sightings. However, you know, there were so many of these over the years that if you looked at the famous Thing photograph, which we looked at earlier on, and sort of said it was all about that, it certainly wasn't. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is we talked about crop circles as they were back then, being labelled as landing nests. This is Middle Hill. You can see the little copse with the barrow on top. And this is a crop circle which appeared summer of 2017, I believe. Now, interestingly, myself and Matt, Kevin Goodman were approached, and John Hanson were approached by a Bournemouth production company to do a little bit of a documentary, which hasn't gone out as yet, but. Whilst in that particular circle, the sound crew experienced stuff dropping out on their equipment malfunctions. They'd come away from the centre of the circle and come out of it. It would come back online. As soon as they go back in, it'd drop out again. Now, it's my consideration that most crop circles are in fact man-made, but you still have these odd, strange things which incur within crop circles. That particular one, as I say, was in between Battlesbury and Star Hill. I think I've got a bit of video in a minute, but I think there's a video. Can we have a look? Yeah, keep calm and sky watch. There should be a couple of videos on there. You can't hear, there's no audio to this one.
Oh, there's no audio, okay.
Okay. Now this was filmed by a Bristol-based production company who were in the town making a video when they caught this particular object. It just disappears. Now, I mean, we have to remember that Warminster is right on the cusp of the Salisbury Plain. Now, and the army there with flares, sodium flares, and the likes on a regular occurrence. Now, whether that was a flare or not, I don't know. I don't think so. It may well have been a reflection on some sort of helicopter. Who knows? But it does seem a bit strange.
But like you say, the people, that's not the number one priority, isn't taking photos for a lot of people.
Exactly.
Clay Hill. Okay, I think there's another video. If you just pause that one. Okay, this is a Clay Hill crop circle from around, I think, 2010. Yeah. Now there's a small white dot of light which appears in a minute and traverses across the field. Seems to be nibbing on and off as it goes. Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, balls of light are prevalent within, people have seen him in and around crop circles, haven't they? If, you know, there's a number of these sort of type of footage of the balls of light. Well, I mean, a lot of people have said it's a bird or something. Who knows? I mean, the definition is great. You can't discern it particularly well, can you? I don't know. It could be a bird. I personally think that there is some footage where the balls of light are moving so fast that it'd be hard to suggest it was a bird. But flapping, yeah. Take your point. Yeah, take your point.
Yeah, the field is in shadow because the sun is low.
Yeah.
The field's in shadow, but the tops of the trees are lit. And the tops of the field doesn't work. So the bird can also be higher in the field.
I'd have thought so. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
They called it the Warminster Thing.
I saw this thing go over what they call the thing. And it was exactly like a railway carriage. Glitter. It started up overhead there, and I saw it and watched it right at the side, right over the hills.
But I looked in that direction, there was a silver plane and a pink one, like between a pink and a red cerise colour then. Right side by side, and they were in that direction, and there was no temple, I don't know where it went to.
I heard this noise, it was a hell of a noise it was, and came down, you know, it was a bit misty, foggy, and well, it was like as if a tin can was floating nuts and bolts, you know, and somebody was rattling it.
What I did see was a green shimmering light for about a quarter of an hour.
Well, it's hard to explain, it's like a bright light with a red light in the middle.
Like cigar shape, glowing at each end.
I saw something over there between those two bungalows, and to me it looked as if it was about 500 feet high. No higher. It seemed to be hovering.
It resembled something like a comet, but comets are white, so this one was orange, oval colour, so it certainly wasn't a comet.
There very well might be something in the stratosphere. I mean, we're sending spaceships to other planets, and I can't see any reason why, if there is life on another planet, they shouldn't be sending craft to us.
Obviously, these things, whatever they are infinitely manoeuvrable. They're certainly beyond our ability to catch. We can't put salt on their tails, as it were.
Tell me what you saw.
Just an object in the sky.
What did it look like?
Like a saucer.
Yes. And were there any lights or anything around?
No, it's just a white object in the sky. We were busy in here, but we had to come back in. But the three soldiers that were there with us, they also saw it. And they described it more or less like a lampshade. Well, although I've seen it, it hasn't convinced me. I still don't think there's anything in it myself.
I think it's just a load of tripe. That's all.
Hundreds, perhaps thousands of people were convinced that creatures from outer space had arrived. Excitement grew to fear, so much so that on August the 27th, 1965, the council chairman took the extraordinary step of calling a public meeting. The town hall was besieged, and the Warminster legend had begun.
I have never seen anything like it that Friday evening. It was fantastic. The people in the town, the reporters, all the dailies, my phone didn't stop ringing. We had them knocking at the doors. I've never seen anything like it. The only thing I could do, on the Monday morning I went on holiday. to get away from it.
It started off Christmas Eve 1964, which we published. A very respected member of Warminster, it was the postmaster actually, he reckoned he had strange noises on Christmas Eve, rattling on the roof, no known cause. And really, I suppose that's what started it, and from then it snowballed.
Reports multiplied, eerie shapes, ghostly lights in the sky, and more than anything, that awful, terrifying noise. From all over the world, the watchers came, scanning the skies from the hilltops round this Wiltshire market town. In 4 months, 400 sightings had been reported. In the pubs and in the shops, the talk was of little else but the thing. And generations of television reporters were to cut their teeth on the mystery.
And this Wiltshire town is back in the news again because yet another attempt is now being made to identify the Warminster Thing. Now, the Warminster Thing, as some people already know, is the term given to mysterious objects which have been seen in the sky around these parts. And this latest investigation, the most comprehensive yet, is being undertaken by an organisation called BUFORA. Now, that stands for the British Unidentified Flying Object Research Association.
It seemed incredible, but in Warminster, excitement was at fever pitch. Surely, they argued, the sheer weight of evidence meant that something was going on.
We have no doubt whatsoever that the phenomena at Warminster, the sounds and the sights are connected with and caused by flying saucers. And therefore, of course, it is our business, and we are investigating, have been since the phenomena were widely reported.
Now, the all-important question, does this thing really exist, or is it just a joke?
Well, it exists undoubtedly. We have a very wide range of tests of this from people of all walks of life testing to that fact. Sights and sounds around here leave no doubt that what we're dealing with is a flying saucer, or is flying saucers. And of course, the existence of those is, I think, unquestionable.
Would you say that we face any danger from these flying saucers?
I would say it can't be ruled out. So far, of course, there have been no overt acts of hostility which can definitely be established to be such. There are some disturbing incidents, but of course it's possible that another interpretation ought to be put upon these things. I don't think we need to be afraid to go to bed tonight, but one never knows, of course, in the long run.
But, real or imagined, Warminster was in ferment. Indeed it was. Activity was centred on the 2 great hills outside the town. Reports, seemingly reliable, spoke of whole flocks of pigeons struck dead in mid-flight. Soil samples from key areas turned up the remains of moles and mice, their bodies riddled with tiny holes. It was the greatest story the Little Warminster Journal ever had. It had all begun quietly enough at Christmas. Tucked away beneath their New Year calendar was a report of a noise, unearthly and terrifying.
Suddenly, the silence was broken by a crackling sound emanating from the Bell Hill direction. At first, she thought that it was simply a lorry unloading on the hill. But it passed over her head and became louder and louder.
Letters began to arrive, more reports followed, but even then the story was almost hidden below the births, marriages and deaths, the farming reports and the adverts.
That menacing vibrating noise has been heard again in Warminster. The shock waves of sound which can kill and maim birds and stun the senses of rational people.
Finally, belatedly, it made the headline. And after that, and for the next 10 years or more, stories about creatures from other planets became part of the staple diet in the newspaper columns.
Barely 2 days after the public meeting held in Warminster Town Hall to discuss and try to identify the thing, it has been seen by at least 5 people over the bank holiday period.
Whether you believed it all or not, the stories of the experiences of the people of Warminster became ever more gripping.
He was shaking in every limb when he staggered indoors. His family were most concerned, but it was some time before he told them of his peculiar experience on that walk through the darkness. He saw nothing. It was a noise that made the strong lad's knees knock. The same weird crackling sound.
People were rushing here from all parts of the country who were interested in UFOs. We hadn't heard much about it until then, but We had a number of callers at the office wanting to know what was going on, and they were going up on the plane and spotting at night and staying up there all night. Well, by the time they'd been up there in the dark and looking at the sky, I think they saw a lot more than was really there. Obviously, some people really thought they saw something, but I'm sure that everyone who's been out and looked at the stars, that by the time you've stood gazing at them for 10 minutes, they all appear to be moving about.
But one photographer, Mr. Gordon Faulkner, had better luck. He managed to take a picture of a flying saucer that hit the British press in a big way and then went round the world. Mr. Faulkner, in fact, has done much to put Warminster on the flying saucer map. This is how he got his picture.
I had a camera with me. I was taking it down to my sister and wanted to borrow it. And, well, as I say, I just had the camera with me. Pure luck, I just handed it into the picture.
The object was staying still all this time, wasn't it? Or was it
No, it was moving.
But moving slowly?
It was moving fairly fast. I wouldn't like to say how fast, but I couldn't say how fast.
Now, some people have said that when they try to take a picture of one of these things, there's been some mysterious force or radiation that stopped the camera from working. Did you find this?
It didn't stop the camera from working.
Have you had people say that this picture is a fake?
Of course I have, yes. I mean,
what do you say to them when they say that?
They're entitled to their own opinion. I know it's not fake. And it doesn't really bother me what other people think.
Some people, nonetheless, are distinctly bothered. Colonel Allen, for instance.
Well, I think the whole thing's a lot of nonsense.
Why do you say that?
Well, to begin with, there isn't a single authenticated sighting by somebody who's, shall we say, qualified to give an impartial scientific assessment of the sighting.
Now, you believe, I think, that it's possible to fake photographs of these objects fairly easily. In fact, you've done it yourself.
Yes.
How have you done this?
Yes. Well, I have one colour film left on a reel, and so I produced this.
And this is exactly what?
Well, the flying object was actually drawn on a piece of paper and cut out in outline, and then photographed against a blue bath towel on the ground, whilst I stood on a stepladder leaning against the wall of the house. And I moved the camera slightly as I took the photograph so as to blur the thing.
And what are the reactions of the believers to this photograph? Have you shown it to anyone?
Well, no, I've kept it fairly quiet because I had intended originally to bring it out, whilst admitting it was a fake, next time the thing blew up. As I'm sure it will do. In fact, it is doing now.
Number 42 Chapel Street, Warminster, is out of this world. It's Britain's first satellite station for tracking unidentified flying objects. Using binoculars and a high-powered telescope, the UFO Brigade are mixing up a storm in the Wiltshire heavens, looking for close encounters of the third kind.
Well, I was in the army at the time, and it was way back in '64, and myself and two friends were down the local park, just over the road there, and we saw these people looking into the sky, and lo and behold, there was a UFO. Well, I think it was a UFO. It was a cigar shape, you know, the typical grey cigar shape, and it hovered for about 20 minutes over the church, and that was over the actual town.
It's from this vantage point on Cradle Hill, high over Warminster, that the British UFO Society are hitching their wagon to a star, as real or imaginary as you care to believe. They claim the skies around Warminster are littered with UFO junk, which shines on the faithful who come here from all over the world. On a clear day, they say, you can see practically anything. Strange lights of brilliant colour have been reported streaking across the sky, sometimes hovering for several minutes before disappearing into the hillside. More exaggerated claims speak of elf-like visitors coming down from flying saucers and interrupting army manoeuvres at the nearby Royal School of Infantry. But seeing is believing, say the UFO Society, and it's true that more and more people, disillusioned with life on Earth, want to believe in a force outside their understanding. For this reason, the UFO people are offering star weekends with bed and breakfast tossed in between the odd galactic happening. But the town of Warminster, which is preparing for its summer tourist season, thinks UFOs are strictly non-new. Overtures to the local Chamber of Commerce for more hotel accommodation went down with as much conviction as finding a black hole on Salisbury Plain. But undeterred, the UFO Society are fighting on. Inside a cottage they've bought and renovated for £11,000, they're hoping to whet the imagination of Star Trekkers with UFO badges, stickers, notepaper, books and T-shirts. A mass of literature is being gathered to awaken skeptical minds. Photographs of actual sightings are on display, although few of them have been authenticated. It's said that 90% of all reported sightings can be explained by natural phenomena. But what about the other 10%? Sally Pike believes she witnessed the real thing.
The closest sighting I've ever had, I believe, was Star Hill at Warminster, and that was a really good one. You know, it was close up, or I should say about a quarter of a mile, I suppose, with a large orange globe floating across from the Stonehenge direction, right in front of about 12 of us, which, you know, who were present at the time. It was just twilight. And through binoculars, when you observed this, you could see the traditional dish shape with the sort of orange light flashing on the top, and it followed the contours of the hill at Star and came down, you know, fairly close at hand, and it sort of hovered. It was an actual beautiful shot, you know, like as if it had posed specially for us. And whilst everybody watched it, the light on the top changed from an orange to a white, and it seemed to spin, and it, you know, it's visible there for about, oh, I think it was 2 minutes.
The British UFO Society claim that people who come to Warminster in search of terrestrial phenomena feel a form of magnetic attraction which draws them here. That may be as high-flown as Martians eating mashed potato, but it certainly helps newspaper circulations. If Warminster is to become a happy holiday ground for star-struck earthlings, what's on offer? Ken Rogers, a UFO director, explains.
Well, we can put you up for weekends or even weeks' holidays if you want to. There's a shortage of accommodation in the town, hotel-wise, and here people can come and sky watch at night, come in sort of in the early hours of the morning and so on. They can also come and during the daytime and study UFO literature, write, do research and so on.
If I didn't see a UFO, would you give me my money back?
Oh, we can't guarantee that you'll see a UFO. We can't guarantee that anybody will see anything inexplicable. But there's been so much evidence from just the local townspeople and from people from all over the country and many parts of the world who have come here and seen. And Warminster is the most likely place to come in any part of the country than anywhere else.
And so it's up to the entire company of flying saucers, cigar-shaped objects, bright lights and supporting androids to get their little show lit up over the skies of Warminster this summer. The British UFO Society are hoping the Force will be with them.
The skeptics were hard put to dismiss some of the reports. In the village of Steeple Ashton, dozens experienced an encounter of the most peculiar kind.
The chap here in the blue sweater, now you've got a good view of it. What do you think it was?
I think it was a spaceship.
A spaceship?
Yep.
Why do you think that, in all seriousness?
Well, it had a hole through the middle, but it was sort of hard around the edge outside. The clouds couldn't pass through the outside of it. Could go through the middle, though.
Have you ever seen anything like it before?
No. Not nothing like that.
And how long were you able to see it?
I was up in the window, I saw it about 3 minutes.
3 minutes?
Yeah.
Was it sort of hovering, or...?
No, it was just going around like a whale. Just going over.
Now, you got a good view of it. Describe it to me.
Well, it was sort of blackish grey wing going across the sky. And it was dark on one side, and in the bottom it had a sort of little line through it. And it was moving across the sky slowly, and then it disappeared behind a tree.
Miss Green, did you see the phantom object yourself?
I saw it, yes.
How would you describe it?
Very much as the children did, as it appeared to be a smoke ring. That's the best way that I can describe it, as a smoke ring.
Any theories as to what it might be?
No theories at all. None at all.
I mean, obviously people are going to speculate men from Mars or what have you. I mean,
the only thing I can say really is that I'm glad there were a lot of other people saw it at the same time as I did.
Okay, well, I just want to show you that quick clip there about the Steeple Ashton, because it has parallels, of course, with the Broadhaven. If you looked at the actual date then, that occurred in January, tail end of January 1977. Of course, I think the Broadhaven was February 77, yeah? Yeah. So, yeah, well, that's it for me then, folks. Thanks very much. I'm happy to take Q&A. Thanks, guys. Any questions at all? Yes, mate.
The noise.
Yeah.
Somebody on that said it was like a crackling noise.
Yeah.
Was it always like that? Or was it
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, in the first month, the intensity of people described as what a cracking, a sonic noise. I think one witness actually described it as like branches being dragged across the roof tiles. Another person described it as being like hailstones raining down. So yeah, I mean, like I say, the actual sounds, and I think very much the word, the Warminster thing, came about because of the ambiguous nature at first, because there wasn't necessarily UFOs, it was the strange sounds, and then the sounds were then attached to the UFO sighting. So that's why I think it gets the thing. Plus, back in the 60s, certainly in the UK, UFOs probably weren't perhaps used. You know, the word UFO weren't perhaps used in the media so readily. But yeah, the strange sounds, which were pretty much as that person described them. Any question? Hello?
Yeah. I heard it described that you were third generation Skywatcher.
Yeah.
So has your father or anything else, any other relatives?
No, I mean, third generation, the original Skywatchers would have been the guys who were doing it. The Arthur Shetterwoods, they would have been the first generation. The second generation would have been the ones who come along in the tail end of the mid-70s into the 80s, and then for my part of it, I've kind of been, skywatching from 90s onwards, and I'm obviously utilised certain cameras and night vision equipment. He did, yeah. Well, he had a number of books. He had gone to some of the various locations. I don't know. He actually never told me if he'd had a sighting, but he was certainly interested in it. As I say, he had countless books and magazines on the subject. And back on the Sunday in the early 80s, the TV supplement would have been, Arthur C. Clarke's kind of programme, which was used to air then. Yeah. Any more questions?
Am I wrong by saying that the picture of the crop circles that you showed, you can see where the lawnmower or the tractor had gone into that? It was like sort of, where the wheels had gone.
Which one?
It was on the slideshow, it was. If you want to bring that up.
Yeah, because you got where the tractor's been, and then often in the crop circles, it's in the middle of the tractor box.
Yeah, well, Matt probably tell you better, but the circle makers, if you believe circle makers make them or not, would come into the field, trying not to make too much of a disturbance, and they probably would use those tractor lines.
Do you get many sightings reported these days?
Not like obviously not like in the height of the 60s. We occasionally have sightings, but the ones that occur mostly of late around Warminster is this a misidentification of the stunt plane with the pyrotechnics, which gets reported almost every other month. It does look odd from a distance. I give you that. When I first saw it, I was, what's that? But yeah, it's from a guy who he actually flies stunt planes. He's based out at Crockerton. A guy called Tim Dews, and I think the company's called Aerosparks, and they do exhibitions all around the world, and this often gets mistaken as a UFO.
What was the feelings of the army barracks there when the stuff was going on?
Well, the army was obviously, I'm not saying they were put out, but certainly they were blamed for a lot of the stuff, to which they kind of denied and said that it was nothing to do with us. But I mean, like I say, a lot of the local people would have been aware of the kind of military manoeuvres, having lived there for many years. It was probably some of these, the sky watchers who perhaps come to the town. If they were going to misidentify anything, perhaps it was some sort of army manoeuvres or flares and that sort of thing. But like we kept saying, there was underlining a real phenomenon going on. Yes.
Why do you think, well, not why do you personally think, but anybody think that around that time there was so many sightings that then before there wasn't so many that anybody was aware of, and afterwards? Why is it that they seem to, because it's not the only place that it's done that to over a certain period?
No, I mean, the lady was just asking about why was there so many sightings. It was really the first kind of euphical of the UK. I think. Well, actually, there was a flap in Stoke-on-Trent in the early '60s. Banbury as well, around the same sort of time as Warminster. But I don't know. I mean, I've no idea. I mean, I think to a lot of people prior to Warminster becoming this kind of window area or hotspot, a lot of people thought that sort of thing only sort of occurred in, I don't know, Arizona or Utah or somewhere like that. But with the backdrop and with the hills and the ancient sites, it kind of worked, I suppose, for a lot of people that were drawn to it. And of course, if you think of the times, towards the mid '60s, going to the '70s, kind of the New Agers caught hold of it, and they all kind of rolled up as well. So. It's kind of like a bit of a Glastonbury for UFOs.
There was sort of said of human energy, that the more energy that's sort of put in, they're sort of aware of almost. It's almost like they're giving us a bit of a show.
Yeah, you could be right. Yeah, there's a lot of theories on, UFOs perhaps being forms or psychic events or, sort of tulpas of sorts. Yeah, I don't disagree. Yes.
Did you experience anything when you went into the crop circle?
The one where they had the sound malfunction. Not personally. It was only a case of the sound equipment actually dropping out. I personally didn't experience anything untoward.
Have you guys?
Yes.
You know the orb going across the field?
Sorry?
The reflective light, that orb going across
yes,
the field.
Yeah.
There's another one out that I've seen that it goes over a tractor and the tractor stops and he looks up at it.
Yeah, I think that's Steve Alexander's footage from back in the 90s. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, same similar sort of thing. I think there's also a guy called Pierre Beek who's also filmed a lot of those kind of anomalous white orbs in and around crop circles. I mean, there is a famous one of one supposedly forming one, but I think it's pretty much been debunked as being a hoax. Any more? Yes. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry, the gentleman at the end there.
Yeah, I think the Faulkner photos was a fake.
Yeah.
When they showed us the video clip and the interview Gordon Faulkner,
yeah,
he actually said, they asked him, was it still or was it, and he said very fast.
He did, didn't he? Yeah.
And if you look at this, I've had this 50 years, and it says they are using a linear 50th of a second, that would be blur.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, like we said earlier, it is a controversial photograph, and the actual time he suggested he took it, which was I think at 8 o'clock in the evening, it would have undoubtedly been dark at that time. But like we were saying earlier, at that point it didn't really matter. The only thing that did was kind of generate the public's interest. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just. You mentioned the Broadhaven happening very soon afterwards.
Yeah.
I read about the Broadhaven and I hadn't connected the two together being in the same year funding.
No.
But that's quite strange because they had a great big palaver for a while, didn't they?
Yeah, that's right. That's why I actually said, well, the guys actually put on the Broadhaven 40th anniversary conference last year, wasn't it? So yeah, there is those parallels with the two cases. I think obviously in the case of Broadhaven that the children all did pictures, and it was a bigger story really, wasn't it? I think it was on Blue Peter and on the national news as opposed to just being on the local news.
You'd be surprised of actually how many sightings there are by school children in schools.
Yeah,
there's quite a few. You know?
Yeah, you got the Ariel case, haven't you? And you've got the one in Australia.
Yeah, the one in Zimbabwe, was it?
Yeah,
Africa.
Yeah,
and there was another school.
The Father Gill case.
Yeah, there was another school in near Broadhaven that saw something. I think it was the same day, wasn't it, Emlyn?
Yeah, Hugh Branston.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, any more?
Do you think some of the, there was one where there was a night vision, one with a woman smoking a cigarette?
Yeah.
There was a quick light. Do you think that could be something as simple as maybe like, infrared bouncing back off some dust?
yeah, could be. I mean, only sort of shown it for purpose of illustration, So yeah, it could be a lot of things, of course.
What do you think all of this is? And do you think it's just some people,
No. I mean, I think.
Do you think it was?
You think you got to take into consideration the Warminster flat was at its height during the mid '60s, but then ran till kind of about 1980. So you had a 15-year period, and I think there was genuine sightings. There's some people who came to the town probably was a bit disingenuous as well. So you've got a whole hodgepodge of different things going on, but underlining there was too many reports for it to be
nothing.
Exactly, yeah.
There's probably a few misidentified.
Definitely misidentifications. Again, like we said, Arthur Shuttlewood, who wrote the books around Warminster. He had a kind of flowery writing style, and as I said, he kind of sexed it up in the way he described things happen. But out of everybody who ever talked to, skeptics like who actually met Arthur said, he was many things, but he wasn't a liar. He did have this kind of way of flowering things up, but he wasn't a liar.
He didn't write the Broadhaven information, though, did he?
No, that was Peter Paget and
Randall Jones Pugh.
Randall Jones Pugh.
And I can't remember, was he a flowery writer? I mean, I just read it.
What, Peter Paget?
Yeah, was he a bit well-rounded?
Not so much these days.
No, back then in Broadhaven, when he did his writing.
I think that at the time when he wrote The Welsh Triangle, I think that was a brilliant book. I think that's a good book,
He's got older, he's got like the rails of it,
Okay, any more questions?
Okay.
No? Okay, well, thanks very much, guys. Thanks for having me. Cheers, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Steve, for coming all the way from Warminster. And some of you might notice little chap here with a bald head, Matthew Williams. He came to give us a talk a few months ago, if you remember.
Bases.
Sorry?
Bases
talk.
Underground bases.
Oh, underground bases. I remember the bases thing on his face. Yeah, it is on YouTube.
It's on the internet.
It's on YouTube if you missed that, yeah. But Matthew brought Steve with him because they live nearby, and Matthew's been doing the filming. And lucky he did, actually, because our camera, Mike hadn't charged the battery on it, and he went flat at the beginning. So anyway, thanks for all for coming, and see you all again in 2 weeks. Okay, thank you.